Hello, everyone. I'm Emily Moore from thinkstep-anz. I'm really excited to be hosting another installment in our ThinkStep webinar series for you today. Today, we're hearing all about digital product passports with Mick from Rosella Street and Jim from ThinkStep. So, excited to go through these slides with you and hear from our awesome presenters. So, here's our speakers once again, Mick and Jim, and you'll be hearing a bit from both of them as we continue. So we've got a short poll just to hear people's current thoughts or experiences with digital product passports before we launch into the technical content. So I'm going to launch these questions now, and they should just pop up in your screen. Really appreciate it if you take this time to reflect and answer those. So question 1, how familiar are you with digital product passports? So maybe you've never heard of them before, maybe you have some understanding of what they are, or maybe you're already using them, so you already know everything about them. Maybe not everything, but most things. So it seems like there's a bit of awareness from everyone. Even if you're not necessarily using them yet, you are aware of what they are. There are some who are already using them, which is fantastic. But there's not that many people who have never heard of them at all. So it's good to hear that they are now becoming an established term. Perfect. All right, I'm going to end that poll. Thank you very much for answering, everyone. And I'll launch into a second poll, which is of a similar sort of vibe. Okay, so when does circularity get considered in your product decisions? So take a moment and select the one that best suits you. We're getting some whole life cycle circularity considerations in there, which we love. A bit during design, which would make sense for that upfront piece. Seems like there's a few people it's not quite relevant for, or perhaps it just isn't considered at this time yet. I'll just give you another couple of seconds to respond. Cool. All right. Thank you, everyone who participated in that poll. Seems like circularity gets considered throughout the whole life cycle, so that is really heartwarming to hear. And for those who don't consider it necessarily over the whole life cycle, it's at least during maybe the design more so than procurement. So that's great to see that circularity is at least getting considered in product decisions being made. Perfect. All right. So without further ado, I will pass on to Jim, who will tell us a little bit more about MCI, digital product passports on a higher level. So Jim, take it away.
Fantastic. Thanks, Em. Yeah, welcome everybody to this webinar. It's great to be joined by Mick today. I'm just going to give a little bit of an introductory session really on the MCI and its role in digital product passports before I hand over. So for those of you who may not be aware of what the MCI is, it was a methodology developed by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation back in 2015, so over a decade ago now. It's the leading solution to a very specific problem, which is the comparability of different circular models. So if we look at things like durability, reuse, remanufacturing, responsible sourcing, recycling, composting, energy recovery in some cases, these are all components of the circular economy, but they're all measured differently, which makes comparison really difficult. So what the MCI does is it produces a single metric that ranges from 0% to 100% circular, that's comparable across all of the different models and all of the combinations of those models, so we can compare completely different products or products that deliver circularity in different ways. At the moment, it's the only circularity metric that's really being published in anger. So there's 180 plus products out there that have published verified MCIs today, and there's a whole pile more coming. You'll also see on the right side of this some red dots. These are self-declared figures for a variety of other products that we're seeing on the market. So it's being picked up quite broadly and used as a means of communicating circularity of products. It's been adopted quite widely as well, so it forms part of the more recent Green Star certifications. It's being used by the Infrastructure Sustainability Council. It's been picked up by all of the major LCA platforms and several leading digital product passport systems, which is what we're talking about today. It also informed ISO 59020, which I was also directly involved in, as one of the background documents that was considered during the formulation of that standard. And that standard then went on to inform things like the Global Circularity Protocol, which some of you will have heard of as well. So it's got quite a long history of use and is gaining momentum still. Now, the MCI shows an overall score, as I said, which is directly comparable. It also shows where that score comes from. So you'll notice on this that it shows how much of that score comes from material inputs, how much of it comes from where the product goes at the end of the life, the material outputs, and how much comes from the use of the product, whether it lasts longer than normal or is used more intensively. You'll notice for this particular product, though, that a significant proportion of the 65% comes from the outputs, which is not something that is in the hands of the manufacturer of the product. It really comes down to the user of the product, how long they use the product for, and how they manage the end of use recovery. So the manufacturer doesn't control that directly, but they do have some influence on it in terms of their choice of materials and their design and how that aids recovery of the product. So it's important to include those aspects as a published MCI figure, because we want to encourage product manufacturers to consider these downstream aspects of circularity and to enable those to take place. But it is nevertheless a figure that is based on an expectation of what will happen to the product under normal conditions. But one of the things that you can do with the MCI now is you can update these different components independently. So the manufacturer can set what the material inputs are and how much circularity comes from those. We can then update the material outputs in the use phase retrospectively to reflect what actually happens in real life. So this figure is a little bit complicated, but bear with me. So we have MCI on the vertical axis and lifetime on the bottom axis, which we'll go on to in a minute. This point here on this blue line is the snapshot of the expected MCI for this product, which is the same one we saw before. That reflects how the product's been made, how long they expect it to last, which is the 10 years, and how they expect it to be recovered on the market they're selling it into based on how they've designed it and the recovery infrastructure that exists. We can also see with the red line for the same product what the MCI would be if that product was just sent to landfill. So this is a drop in circularity from 65% down to closer to 30% in this case, if that product is not recovered effectively. Similarly, if the product is fully recovered or reused, the MCI is expected to jump to over 80% in this case, because we're gaining that additional circularity from retaining those materials in use. Similarly, we can move along one of these lines. So we can either move to the right, preferably, to make the product last longer. So we can show that the circularity would actually jump to about 80% if we made this product last for around 17 years rather than 10. And in the opposite direction, if we only use this product for 3 or 4 years rather than the expected 10, we actually undo a lot of the circular benefits that are built in by the manufacturer by driving greater churn of these products through the cycle. So we can see a range of different scenarios through this tool, and we can update this data to reflect what's actually happening. Now, I'm not saying that these two views are more important than each other, but they're both important for very different purposes. So the point of production snapshot, that 65%, is important for procurement and declarations because it enables comparison before all the user-based decisions are known. But it's important that the assumptions behind that are documented, even though we can go back and update those retrospectively. Having a minimal data set of key figures, I think it's about half a dozen figures that you need, enables that scenario modeling. And that's the sort of thing that we can feed through as part of a product circularity data sheet or as part of a digital product passport. The live or updatable MCI is really useful for projects and reporting because it reflects the circularity as it evolves throughout the life cycle of the product. It enables us to update use and recovery assumptions independently of product manufacture. It means that users can see the impacts of their decisions on circularity, and it means that projects that are using materials that have MCIs can actually push their circularity higher than the manufacturer's stated value by using the product more effectively or recovering them more effectively. It also means that impacts of decisions on circularity can be quickly assessed by updating the values around this model. So we can see how much our circularity would drop if we retire a component early, for example. Now, all of this is available through a variety of different tools, as I mentioned. We're just released a tool called Ecotegral MCI, which enables you to do a lot of these MCI calculations. And one of the outputs of that tool is a product circularity data sheet, which you'll have heard me mention already. This is a format that was defined by ISO 59040. So it's a standardized data set that's intended to be machine readable, it's consistent, and has unique identifiers for each of the data fields. It's intended to aid supply chain communication, so both up and down the supply chain, and is ideal for digital product passports because it captures all of the material inputs, any hazardous substances that may be present, information on circular production, on durability and extended lifetime, and circularity at the end of use. So this format is something we expect to see used more as communication around circularity increases. And as I said, you can play with it in the Ecotegral MCI tool if you wish. Now, building on that, the Ecotegral MCI tool is something that's intended for a variety of use cases from design through to development and declaration. Within the design phase, it's a very quick way of getting a gauge on what the MCI is likely to be. You can put some basic data in there quite quickly, get a quick MCI score, compare it to other solutions, and it helps you to identify hotspots and opportunities in your product. During development, you can then improve the data that you have, include information about procurement and design, and you can see how your MCI score improves as a result of that. And there are a couple of reports in the tool that are useful for verification or for inclusion in EPDs or as a standalone declaration, as well as the PCDS for digital product passports. And on that note, I'll hand you over to Mick, who will tell you more about digital product passports. Over to you, Mick.
Hi, everybody. Mick Fritschy from Rosella Street, where we have a digital product passport system. And thanks for joining today, and thanks to thinkstep for hosting the webinar. So I thought I'd just start by giving a little bit of an overview of the digital product passport system that we have built, and just to reflect on the initial poll at the beginning. Not everybody's heard of a digital product passport, and some people are probably just on the beginning of the journey in relation to digital product passports and what the potential might be. So a digital product passport is distinct from a normal static digital record in that it's a dynamic record that updates across its life. Information is collected from initial material provenance and then follows the product all the way through to its end of use and then onto its next use as well. So I'll explain a little bit about how all that works. So a digital product passport brings together material composition, including provenance of those different materials and percentage recycled content, the end of use or end of life options for the product or material, technical and environmental specifications. That also includes things like, is it repairable? And if so, there can be repair manuals included. Are the components disassemblable? And each of those components, you can attach information about what the potential end of use fates are. The information in the digital product passport is then backed up by certificates and accreditation where they're held. So it could be that there's an EPD, Environmental Product Declaration, which a particular product has, or there could be a product carbon footprint, or there could be a product circularity data sheet. All of these things can be attached, GECA labels, and so on. And one of the beauties of a DPP is that it enables multiple different certificates and accreditations and product standards to be attached to the one central record. In relation to the dynamic update element of a digital product passport, and I will refer to them as DPPs, just to let you know what acronym I'm talking about there if I refer to them as DPPs. The multiple different piece of information could be attached, and it could be that there's ongoing research and development on a particular product, which then identifies a new end of use option. So that can then be entered into the central DPP record, and when that's done, it flows through to the records of all of those that have procured the digital product passport. So when a digital product passport is created, it goes into an Australia-New Zealand DPP database, and users, particularly those that are looking at different designs or those that are looking to procure products, can create an account in the DPP system, and they can draw products into their account into a project. And when they draw their products into a project, it provides them with automated reporting. So the component information in the DPP breaks down and feeds automated reporting like a material bank. So it could be a building or a piece of infrastructure or an office fit out. And as different products are added to that project, it extracts the material information and builds a material bank to show you what assets that you have. And then you can also do some reports in future financial years to see what's going to be reaching end of use in a particular future financial year. So that enables us some planning in the future. so that people can look at in 3 years' time, depending on what your planning horizon is, what's available for reuse, and then you can look at what you might be able to feed into a future project. At a state level, it's also possible for it to be used by the state to look at what volumes of materials are going to be available for recycling in years to come. So you could even plan 5 years ahead for that. And you can see that there's hundreds of thousands of tons of steel, for example, that's ready for recycling. And that might mean that there's additional investment required, for example, in recycling infrastructure to process those volumes of materials. There's also a private digital product passport, which is when you're adding records to a project. If there's not a digital product passport produced by a manufacturer, you can produce a private digital product passport to plug any gaps. And again, that can be fed into projects to feed the automated reporting. The DPP database, just to give you a quick glimpse, when you do a search for products, it gives you an initial tranche of results, an overview of the different products, and you can use a series of filters. So you might be interested in local manufacturer, or you might be interested in a certain lifespan. You could be looking for percentages, minimum percentages of recycled content, or products with no chemicals of concern or hazardous substances. Once you do an initial triage, you can then click to compare a couple of products in more detail, and that gives you a product comparison. One of the reasons we love the MCI indicator is it gives that overview of the circularity, and that's a great metric because it's quite hard when you're looking to consider across the board all the different circular elements that could potentially make a difference to the future circularity of the product. So in comparison, Material Circularity Indicator is really useful for being able to compare circularity across products, and then you can compare things like climate impact, recycled content, manufacturing location. There could be a project requirement to procure things from within the state. The certificates and standards that products meet can be compared. Sometimes there's none. And we do cater for new and evolving products that haven't yet got an environmental product declaration or product carbon footprint, but often projects are keen and state governments are keen to support the growth of these companies. So it might be more important, for example, that they're locally sourced, but where it's important for them to meet a standard or to have a particular type of evidence to support the claims that they're making, you'll see those in the product standards section. End of life potential in the DPPs, you can see all of the different end of life options, presence or absence of hazardous substances. So you can do an extra layer of refinement here, and then you can click on a DPP to see the full details, quite extensive in a desktop view or a mobile view. You can see here there's different tabs, and there's a whole series of different information that is included, which supports initial selection to potentially consider at the design stage, or to consider during the procurement stage, or if you actually have this product in use and you want to reference it because, for example, you're looking at what you can do with this product at the end of its use. All of the information's here in the DPP record, and you can scan a QR code either on the product or in a folder that might be, for example, on a floor of a building to access the information on a particular product or material. Yeah, just very quickly, in terms of some of the key features here, you can see there's a traceability section, and that is information about where the materials have come from and any changes to the materials during the product's journey. There's also an area in the DPP to capture events that happen to a product during its lifetime. So that's another example of the dynamic element of a DPP. So it could be that there's an earthquake or a flood or a fire, and that might impact on the reusability of a material or a product. And so you can enter notes on your instance. Obviously, this doesn't flow back into the Australia New Zealand DPP database, but in your instance, in your project, you can add notes to your products and materials as appropriate that affect the future life or the future use. And when this product is then moved into the next project, all of that history is drawn into the next project as well. I can see here there's a whole bunch of different beneficiaries of that sort of information, architects and engineers at the front end, through to building owners and facilities managers who need information about the product as it moves through, including being able to add maintenance information to records. And then as you move through to the end of use, reuse and recovery partners need to make use of the information as well. The final slide is just about In practice, DPPs, from the design end, and MCIs can be used there to compare options and design for circularity. During manufacture, creating products with verified data captured in the digital product passport. In the build phase, accessing DPP data to verify materials on site. So materials that are sent to site can have QR codes with DPP information behind those. It can be attached before materials come to site, or it can be done on site. During the use phase, as Jim mentioned, with MCI being a dynamic indicator as well, if there is a change, for example, so we capture intended end of use of a product. So when you add in your intended end of use, which might be that 50% of the materials in this product are going to go to reuse and 50% are going to go to landfill. As you play with those figures, your MCI figure could also be updated accordingly. You may also extend the projection for usable life from what the manufacturer provided through to a higher level or a lower level. And again, that can update the MCI as well. That's another reason why the MCI is a great indicator within DPPs and elsewhere. And then at the end of life, DPP data supports the recovery, the reuse, and the recycling of materials. Back to you, Emma.
Awesome. Okay, thank you for that, Mick. I'll just take the slides back for a moment there. Yes, thank you to both of you for going through the MCI tool and also how the digital product passport works. I think that's quite enlightening for a lot of people who weren't too familiar with the DPP. Hopefully now they have a really good insight into what it actually looks like and what it can do. So that's fantastic. We will move on to our Q&A now, and we've got quite a few questions, so we'll get through what we can. So I'll just kind of start firing these out to you both. Let me pull up the Q&A and we shall go from there. I noticed quite a few questions for you both, so it's good to have that split. Jim, are you able to open up the Q&A? Because it's not popping up for me anymore. It did before.
Yeah, sure. I have the Q&A here. Do you want me to field some of the questions?
Yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. So let's start with a couple from Mick. How do you calculate the end-of-life potential in the digital product passport database?
That's a good question. So the end-of-life potential is the percentage of products that have non-waste to landfill options.
Fantastic. And could you elaborate on how the database of future or post-consumer materials is created? How the availability location of those materials can be tracked. So you mentioned that it might be possible to know, for example, that 25 tons of steel will become available in 10 years. Can you expand on how that is determined?
So when a product is added to a project, there's a location that gets added to the particular material as well. And the materials, because digital product passports have the material composition, if you add 1,000 units of a particular product, it breaks down the total volumes and adds them to a material bank. So then you have information on what materials are available, where they're located, and then also in the project records, you add in the expected end of use year, and then there's automated reporting, and you can choose a financial year, and it can then tell you by location which materials are reaching which types of end of use fate. So you can filter, you can say, just show me what's going to be available for reuse, what's available for recycling, what's going to landfill, and so on. So that's how that works.
Fantastic. I'll ask you one more before I take a couple of aims at the MCI bit. So what does the team think the legislation would evolve after 2028? Any possibility for mandatory or high impact materials or products to be included? And perhaps coupled to that, what is the access like? Is it openly available or is it a private project-based tool?
I think in terms of legislation, I was recently on a panel with Lisa Clean from Circular Australia during Climate Action Week, and she was mentioning that they're pushing for digital product passports to be mandated, or they expect that Australia will follow the European example. In the meantime, we've done a bit of a mapping of what sorts of legislation and frameworks the DPPs help users to meet on projects, and there's about 60 to 70 different elements that you can tick across different frameworks when you use the DPP system. So I think there's a pretty strong future. And in relation to specifying mandatory high impact materials and products, I hope that that's closely related to the trajectory as well. In terms of the access to the system, The system is through a license that those that are doing major projects get, but we are looking at an overview element of digital product passports that will also be available publicly as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, it certainly seemed from the Australian National Recycling Framework that was kind of gearing towards the adoption of digital product passports, even if it doesn't seem to be specifically mandated. So things seem to be heading that direction. I assume you can see you nodding. Just to answer a couple of questions on the MCI, for the understanding of material outputs are criteria weighted, meaning the higher up the circular economy value chain, the higher circular percentage, i.e. recycling weights more than waste to energy. Yes, that's correct. So the benefit of the MCI is that it includes all of those different circular models. So reuse and composting rate higher than remanufacturing, rate higher than recycling, rate higher than waste to energy. So there is a deliberate hierarchy in there that relates to the amount of material that is either avoided or recovered at the end of the life cycle. It doesn't differentiate between closed loop and open loops, and deliberately so, because that is reflected in other metrics that are more relevant. But yes, but the benefit of the MCI is you do get that that comparability across reuse and remanufacturing for biological and technical materials, and you can compare them side by side. And there was another question looking at, I think it was to do with actual recycling versus potential recycling. The ISO standard, ISO 59020, says that you should use actual recycling rates in your calculations where these are possible. Obviously, if you're putting products out into the market, you don't really know whether they are going to be actually recycled. But you can take a pretty good estimate about what the recycling rates are. Obviously, those are likely to change. If it's a long-lived product, the recycling rate today will be different from 10 years' time. So again, the ability to update your result and to understand how circularity has changed as a result of infrastructure changes is also important. Do we have any other questions? There are quite a few other questions coming through. How are we doing for time, Emily? Do you want to answer a couple more?
Yeah, I reckon we get through whatever's left there, and then I can see there's 10 total. So maybe we go through what's there, and then if any more come after, we can just answer them afterwards.
Fantastic. So is there an expectation that digital product passports will be used or mandated for fast-moving consumer goods in the next few years? I guess, Mick, we're already seeing that for the European products put on the European market, and those European regulations will impact on anything manufactured in Australia and New Zealand that's being exported. Do you have any views in terms of domestic use?
I think that's probably the right answer. It's a little bit perhaps early to say because we're just introducing it in the sort of non-fast moving consumer goods space. So we'll see how successfully that goes and watch keenly on how this goes in Europe.
And I'll perhaps follow up with the last one. Yeah, the end of life steel question as a follow up. Is that quantity location data available to the passport holder only or to the market as well? So, for example, if they're looking for the post-consumer material to be the basis of their new product, can they essentially use it as a marketplace to identify where that material is becoming available?
So we are looking at some aggregated anonymized data to make available a little bit more broadly. So that may potentially be connected with that, but there's also an opportunity to cross-post from the digital product passport marketplace through to some other platforms that facilitate reuse of products. So there'll be information available in that way as well. Those that have a license to the system can generate some data that indicates what sorts of products and materials are available within the system and becoming available for reuse so they can consider those in their design.
Fantastic. I think we're 5 minutes over, so I think I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thanks to you both for answering those questions and for facilitating them, Jim. I will take the screen share.
Thanks for all the great questions, and thanks, Mick, for your responses as well.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Perfect. We'll wrap up now. Just very quickly, another big thank you to both of our speakers for their time today. As Jim was talking about, the Ecotegral MCI tool is out if you want to go to our website. I think I posted a link in the chat a bit earlier in the webinar, so feel free to follow that, or you can find more details on our website as well. We also, for those of you who are looking at climate-related disclosures, we have our disclosure kit, which we launched recently, and you can find that on our website as well. So Thank you very much again to everyone for participating today, and thank you to Jim and Mick. Yeah, have a fantastic rest of your day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
That's it. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
We have many more webinar replays on a whole host of sustainability topics. You can check them out on our website and our YouTube channel.